I've got a service bulletin open in front of me right now, and page 2 says something Honda never printed in your owner's manual. It's a dealer-facing document. Service Bulletin 18-114, first issued in the summer of 2018 and revised more than once after that. And the language on that page isn't marketing language, it's instruction language. Do this, then reflash this. It reads like a repair order, because that's exactly what it is. And nowhere in the glove box literature that came with your car does anybody explain why your dipstick might read above the full mark with oil that smells like a gas pump. Now listen, this isn't a story about a bad engine. The 1.5-liter turbocharged direct-injected 4 that Honda put in the CR-V, the Civic, the Accord, and the Insight is, in my assessment, one of the more impressive small engines of the last decade. Real torque down low, genuinely good fuel economy. But the Bulletin exists because a specific set of owners in a specific set of conditions kept coming back with the same complaint: fuel in the oil. And what Honda did about it is smarter than most people give them credit for, and also more limited than most owners realize. Both of those things are true at once. So what does the document actually tell a technician to do? Strip away the case numbers and the labor codes, and it comes down to a short list. Update the powertrain control software, update the climate control software, change the oil and replace the filter. In the affected cold weather regions, revise the service interval so the maintenance reminder comes up sooner. And in some versions of the campaign, replace the engine air cleaner element and inspect the oil level for a reading above the upper mark. That's it. No new pistons, no new rings, no new injectors. Let that sink in for a second. Here's the thing that jumps out at you when you read it as an owner instead of as a technician. The fix is calibration. Software. Numbers in a table inside a computer. Honda didn't change the metal, they changed the instructions the metal receives. And the Bulletin indicates the goal of those new instructions is to bring engine coolant temperature up faster during cold starts and short drives. That's the whole strategy. Warm the engine sooner. But here's where it gets interesting, because to understand why warming an engine sooner does anything at all for your oil, you have to understand what's happening in the first 90 seconds after you turn the key. Direct injection sprays fuel straight into the combustion chamber at extremely high pressure, not into the intake port, into the chamber itself, inches from the cylinder wall. When that cylinder wall is cold, a portion of the spray doesn't fully vaporize. It condenses. It lands on cold metal as liquid gasoline, and it runs down the bore, and as it runs down, it strips away the microscopic layer of oil the piston rings depend on. Technicians call that bore wash, like washing a plate in a sink. The word is doing exactly what it sounds like it's doing. Think about a pan on your stove. Flick a few drops of water into a hot pan, and they skitter and hiss and vanish in about a second. Now flick the same drops into a cold pan. They just sit there. They pool. They spread out and soak into whatever's already sitting in the pan. That's the difference between a warmed-up cylinder and a cold one, and that's why short trips are the villain in this story. A 12-minute commute in January never gets the pan hot. You're flicking water into a cold pan 2 or 3 times a day, every day, all winter long. 2 other things stack on top of that. The first is ring flutter. At certain load and speed combinations, the piston rings can momentarily lose their seal against the cylinder wall and let combustion pressure and unburned fuel slip past into the crankcase. Fluttering, like a screen door that won't quite latch in the wind. The second is enrichment. Before the oxygen sensors are hot enough for the computer to run closed-loop enrichment and trim the mixture precisely, the engine runs richer on purpose, more fuel than it can perfectly burn. That extra fuel has to go somewhere, and some of it goes down. So now you've got gasoline in your crankcase. Why does that matter? Pour a cup of water into a jar of maple syrup and stir it in. You still have something wet. You still have something that pours. But it doesn't cling to the spoon anymore. It doesn't coat. That's what fuel does to motor oil, and the technical name for what you've lost is effective viscosity. The number printed on the bottle says one thing. The fluid actually circulating through your engine behaves like something thinner. And there's a more specific measurement that matters even more. One almost nobody outside a lab ever mentions. It's called HTHS, high temperature, high shear viscosity. It's measured at 150 degrees Celsius under the kind of violent shearing force oil experiences when it's squeezed between a spinning crankshaft journal and a bearing shell. That thin cushion of oil is the load-carrying film. It's the only thing keeping 2 pieces of metal from touching each other thousands of times a second. Fuel dilution is associated with a measurable drop in HTHS, thinner film, less cushion. And the 2 places that tends to show up first, according to conventional wear analysis thinking, are the main and rod bearings down below and the cam lobes and followers up top. Why does that matter to you, sitting in a driveway with a car that runs perfectly fine? Because bearing and cam wear doesn't announce itself. There's no light. There's no code. It's a slow accumulation that tends to show up as a faint tick on a cold morning, or a compression number that's a little low at 140,000 miles instead of 240. Nobody gets a dashboard warning for a thin load-carrying film. And that's the part that makes this software update genuinely clever, because Honda's engineers went after the one variable they could actually move. Look, if cold cylinder walls are the root cause, then the fastest lever anybody can pull is coolant temperature. The bulletin indicates the updated powertrain calibration changes idle strategy, fueling, and warm-up behavior to get heat into the block sooner. And then there's the part that surprised me the first time I read it. They also reflashed the climate control. Your heater core is a small radiator sitting behind your dashboard. When you crank the heat on a freezing morning, you're actively pulling warmth out of the coolant and blowing it at your knees. Your comfort and your engine's warm-up are in direct competition. So the revised HVAC calibration manages how aggressively the system draws that heat during the warm-up phase. Less heat stolen early means the coolant climbs faster, which means the cylinder walls climb faster, which means less of that injected fuel condenses on cold metal in the first place. Fewer seconds of bore wash per trip, fewer minutes of open-loop overfueling before closed-loop enrichment takes over and trims things properly. It's an elegant piece of engineering, honestly. Attack the window instead of the symptom. Shrink the amount of time the engine spends in the exact condition where dilution happens fastest. And that's not even the part people argue about. Here's what the update does not do, and this is the spine of the whole thing. It does not eliminate fuel dilution. It cannot. Direct injection puts liquid fuel into a chamber that has a wall in it, and some of that fuel is going to find the wall. Every direct injected engine on the road today dilutes its oil to some degree. Ford does it, Volkswagen does it, Toyota does it, Subaru does it. This isn't a Honda-specific law of physics, and anybody telling you Honda invented a broken engine is selling you a story instead of an explanation. What the update changes is the rate. That's the honest framing. Less time cold means less fuel per trip, finding that cylinder wall, which means the dilution percentage climbs more slowly between oil changes. A mitigation of rate, not an elimination of the mechanism. And if your driving pattern is severe enough, a slower rate can still arrive at the same uncomfortable number just later. Reflashing a computer doesn't repeal thermodynamics. If your daily reality is 4 cold starts and 11 total minutes of driving in single-digit weather, the update helps you. It doesn't make you immune. And Honda, to their credit, said as much in the way they structured the remedy. In cold climate markets, the campaign came with extended warranty coverage on the engine for dilution-related concerns, and revised oil change guidance so the interval arrives sooner. Read those two things together for a second. If a software update completely solved a problem, you wouldn't need to extend a warranty against that problem, and you wouldn't need to shorten the interval that the diluted oil sits in the sump. The engineers knew. The dealers were told. You weren't, unless you happened to ask the right service advisor on the right day. But wait, because opinion is cheap, and this is where the numbers earn their keep. Used oil analysis is a mature, boring, unglamorous science. You mail a small sample to a lab, they run it on a spectrometer, they check flash point and viscosity and wear metals, and they mail you back a report with numbers on it. Blackstone Laboratories has been publishing that kind of work for decades, and across owner-submitted samples from these engines in cold climate short trip service, one pattern showed up again and again in a way that's hard to wave away. A typical healthy gasoline engine sample tends to show fuel content somewhere around 1% or lower. Reports circulated by owners of cold climate 1.5-liter cars during that period showed values in a very different neighborhood. 6.2% fuel in oil versus a 1% typical baseline is the kind of comparison that appeared repeatedly in owner-shared lab work. And the supporting numbers moved right along with it. Flashpoint, which is the temperature at which vapor coming off the oil will ignite, dropped from a normal range near 400 degrees Fahrenheit down, into the low 300s on some of those same reports. Viscosity told the same story. An SAE 0W20 oil is specified to land in a fairly narrow band at operating temperature, roughly 8.5 to just under 9.3 centistokes under the SAE J300 grading system. Samples showing heavy dilution came back reading below that band, effectively behaving like a thinner grade than the one printed on the bottle. That's the laboratory version of the maple syrup, and modern API SP oils are formulated with better shear stability and better protection against low-speed pre-ignition than the oils of 10 years ago, which genuinely helps. But no additive package rewrites what raw fuel does to a base stock. I put a version of that question to a tribologist I trust on lubrication problems. I'm a consulting engineer named Dana Whitfield, who builds oil programs for commercial fleets. Her framing stuck with me. She said fuel dilution below roughly 2% is something a well-formulated oil is designed to tolerate, that between 2 and 5%, she starts watching the wear metals closely, and that above 5%, she'd simply shorten the interval rather than argue about whether the engine is fine. No alarm in her voice, just a threshold. And that's a far more useful way to think about this than either panic or dismissal. And this is the part that matters. Honda's position deserves a full hearing here, not a straw man. Their engineers have consistently held that the 1.5 liter was validated with dilution accounted for, that the oil specification and the maintenance reminder logic were designed around a crankcase that sees some fuel, and that the engine's real-world durability record does not show the pattern of failures you'd expect if the fluid were failing to protect the metal. That's not a dodge. That's a testable claim. And in a lot of ways, the field data has actually supported it. Think about how many of these engines are out there. Millions of CR-Vs and Civics across a decade of production, a very large share of them in Canada, the northern United States, and northern Europe, and exactly the cold, short-trip service that makes dilution worst. If diluted oil were producing broad mechanical damage, we'd be swimming in spun bearings and it would be the only thing anybody in the independent shop world talked about. We aren't. Most of these engines are doing precisely what a Honda 4-cylinder is supposed to do, racking up miles quietly. That's evidence too, and it's fair to weigh it. Honda also pointed out something the oil analysis crowd sometimes glosses over. A sample pulled from a car that just finished a 5-minute trip in February will read very differently from one pulled after a long highway run, because a meaningful portion of the light fuel fractions does evaporate back out of the oil once the sump reaches full operating temperature. Fuel in oil isn't a one-way accumulation. It's an equilibrium between what goes in and what boils back off, which means an alarming number on a report is partly a snapshot of when you drew the sample, not purely a verdict on the engine. So where does that leave us? In my assessment, both sides are describing the same engine honestly and reaching different conclusions because they're measuring different things. Honda is measuring catastrophic outcomes. Owners are measuring fluid condition. And fluid condition is a leading indicator, not a guarantee of anything. Evidence suggests a thinner load-carrying film is associated with accelerated wear over time. It does not follow that your car is living on borrowed time. What follows is much more boring and much more useful. Know your own numbers, because your driving pattern is the one variable nobody in Ohio can calibrate for. This next part will have you popping your hood tonight. Go out to your car after it's been sitting for a couple of hours, pull the dipstick, wipe it on a white paper towel. Look at where the oil sits against the marks, then smell the towel. Not a polite little sniff. Actually smell it. If it smells like a gas pump, you've learned something real in about 90 seconds. And if the oil sits above the upper mark when nobody has added any, you've learned something even more specific, because oil doesn't manufacture itself out of thin air. So let's make this conditional, because that's the only honest way to give advice about a car I can't put my hands on. If your dipstick reads at or above the upper mark and you haven't topped it off, then get a used oil analysis done before you change that oil, so you own a number instead of a suspicion. If that analysis comes back above roughly 5% fuel, then, in my assessment, you shorten your interval rather than debating the theory online. If it comes back at 1 or 2%, then you just bought real peace of mind for the price of a takeout dinner. If most of your trips are under 15 minutes in cold weather, then treat your car as being in severe service, no matter what the maintenance reminder tells you, and change your oil on distance and time rather than waiting for a countdown to hit 0. If you can add one longer drive a week, a genuine 20 or 30 minutes at highway speed, then do it, because that's the trip that gets the sump hot enough for light fuel fractions to evaporate back out. That's not a fix, that's a habit. And habits are the cheapest maintenance item you will ever buy. If your car is one of the models covered by those 2018 campaigns and you can't confirm the software was ever actually applied, then call a dealer with your VIN and ask them to check for open updates and campaign history, and ask for the result in writing on the invoice. If you live in one of the cold climate regions where extended coverage was offered, then find out in writing what your specific coverage terms are and when they expire, because a paper trail you built before a problem is worth 10 times a paper trail you try to build after one. And keep every oil change receipt, all of them. If you notice a new tick on cold startup, a fuel smell that's getting stronger sample after sample, or oil consumption that clearly changed, then that's a conversation with a mechanic, not with a comment section. And I want to be clear about what this is. This is general information from somebody who reads a lot of bulletins and a lot of lab reports. Your owner's manual and a mechanic who can actually put hands on your engine are the final word, always. And if the two of us ever disagree, believe them and not me. So here's my challenge, and I mean it. Go check your dipstick tonight. Tonight, not this weekend, not whenever you happen to remember. Then come back and tell me in the comments exactly what you found. The model, the year, the climate you drive in, your typical trip length, and where that oil sat relative to the upper mark. Above it, right at it, or below it. I read those, and the pattern that emerges across a few hundred of them is genuinely more informative than any single lab report, because it's the one data set nobody is publishing. And if you find something you don't like, don't spiral about it. Stay with me instead, because the next one goes into what dilution damage actually looks like once it has already started. What the wear metals in a lab report tell you before anything ever makes a sound. Which numbers mean keep an eye on it, and which numbers mean act now. And how to tell the difference between an engine that's aging normally and one that's aging fast. Check the stick, report back. I'll see you in the next one.